This recording is copyright 2024 Echoes of Ireland and is an excerpt from The Irish Fairy Book by Alfred Percival Graves and George Denham. The Legend of Knockgrafton by T. Crofton Croker. There once was a poor man who lived in the fertile glen of Aherlow at the foot of the gloomy Galtee Mountains, and he had a great hump on his back. He looked just as if his body had been rolled up and placed upon his shoulders, and his head was pressed down with the weight so much that his chin, when he was sitting, used to rest upon his knees for support. The country people were rather shy of meeting him in any lonesome place, for, though a poor creature, he was as harmless and inoffensive as a newborn infant. His deformity was so great that he scarcely appeared to be human at all, and some ill-minded persons had set strange stories about him afloat. He was said to have a great knowledge of herbs and charms, but certain it was that he had a mighty skilful hand in plaiting straws and rushes into hats and baskets. That was the way he made his livelihood. Lusmore, for that was the nickname put upon him, by reason of his always wearing a sprig of the Lusmore fairy cap or foxglove in his little straw hat, would ever get a higher penny for his plaited work than anyone else. And perhaps that was the reason why someone out of envy had circulated the strange stories about him. Be that as it may, it happened he was returning one evening from the pretty town of Cahir towards Kappa, and as little Lusmore walked very slowly, on account of the great hump on his back, it was quite dark when he came to the old moat of Knockgrafton, which stood on the right-hand side of the road. Tired and weary he was, and no ways comfortable in his own mind, thinking how much farther he had to travel, and that he could be walking all the night. So he sat down under the moat to rest himself, and he began mournfully looking upon the moon, which, rising in cloudy majesty at length, apparent queen, unveiled her peerless light, and o'er the dark her silver mantle threw. Presently there arose a wild strain of unearthly melody upon the ear of little Lusmore. He listened, and he thought he had never heard such ravishing music before. It was like the sound of many voices, each mingling and blending with the others so strangely they seemed to be one, though all of them were singing different strains. The words of the song were these: De Luan de Mairt, de Luan de Mairt, de Luan de Mairt, de Luan de Mairt. When there would be a moment's pause, and then the random melody went on again. Lusmore listened attentively, scarcely drawing breath, lest he might lose the slightest note. He now plainly perceived the singing was coming from within the moat, and though at first it charmed him much, he began to get tired of hearing the same round sung over and over so often without any change. So, availing himself of the pause, when De Luan de Mairt had been sung 3 times, he took up the tune, and he raised it with the word agus de Deardaoin, and he went on singing with the voices inside the moat. De Luan de Mairt, de Luan de Mairt, de Luan de Mairt, finishing the melody when the pause came again with agus de Deardaoin. The fairies within Knockgrafton, for the song was a fairy melody, when they heard this addition to the tune, were so much delighted with that instant resolve, it was determined to bring the mortal among them, whose musical skill so far exceeded theirs, and little Lusmore was conveyed into their company with the eddying speed of a whirlwind. Glorious to behold was the sight that burst upon him as he came down through the moat, twirling round and round with the lightness of a straw to the sweetest music that kept time to his motion. The greatest honour was then paid to him, for he was put above all the musicians, and he had servants tending upon him and everything to his heart's content, and a hearty welcome to all, and in short, he was made as much of as if he had been the first man in the land. Presently, Lusmore saw a great consultation going on amongst the fairies, and notwithstanding all their civility, he felt very much frightened, until one, stepping out from the rest, came up to him and said, Lusmore, Lusmore, doubt not nor deplore, for the hump which you bore on your back is no more. Look down on the floor and view it, Lusmore. When these words were said, poor little Lusmore felt himself so light and so happy, he thought he could have bounded at one jump over the moon, like the cow in the history of the Cat and the Fiddle. He saw with inexpressible pleasure his hump tumble down upon the ground from his shoulders. He then tried to lift his head, and he did so with becoming caution, fearing he might knock it against the ceiling of the great hall where he was. He looked round and round again with the greatest wonder and delight upon everything, which appeared more and more beautiful, and overpowered at beholding such a resplendent scene, his head grew dizzy and his eyesight grew dim. At last he fell into a sound sleep, and when he awoke he found it was broad daylight, the sun shining brightly, the birds singing sweetly, and that he was lying just at the foot of Knockgrafton. The cows and sheep were grazing peacefully about him. The first thing Lusmore did after saying his prayers was to put his hand behind to feel for his hump, but no sign of one was there on his back, and he looked at himself with great pride, for he had now become a well-shaped, dapper little fellow, and more than that, found himself in a full suit of new clothes, which he had to conclude the fairies had made for him. Towards Kappa he went, stepping out as lightly and springing up at every step as if he had been all his life a dancing master. Not a creature who met Lusmore knew him without his hump, and he had great work to persuade everybody he was the same man. In truth, he was not as far as the outward appearance went. Of course, it was not long before the story of Lusmore's hump got about, and a great wonder was made of it. Through the country, for many miles round, it was the talk of everyone, both high and low. One morning, as Lusmore was sitting, contented enough at his cabin door, up came an old woman to him, and asked him if he could direct her to Kappa. "I need give you no direction, my good woman," said Lusmore, "for this is Kappa. And who may you want here?" "I've come," said the woman, "out of Dessie's country, in the county of Waterford, looking after one Lusmore, who, I've heard tell, had his hump taken off by the fairies. There's a son of a gossip of mine who has a hump on him that will be his death, and maybe if he could use the same charm as Lusmore, the hump might be taken off him. And now I've told you the reason of my coming so far. 'Tis to find out about this charm if I can." Lusmore, who was ever a good-natured little fellow, told the woman all the particulars, how he'd raised the tune for the fairies Knockgrafton, how his hump had been removed from his shoulders, and how he'd gotten a new suit of clothes into the bargain. The woman thanked him very much, and then went away, quite happy and easy in her own mind. When she came back to her gossip's home in the county of Waterford, she told her everything Lusmore had said, and they put the little hump-backed man, who was a peevish and cunning creature from his birth, upon a cart, and they took him all the way across the country. It was a long journey, but they didn't care for that, so the hump was taken off from him, and they brought him just at nightfall and left him under the old moat of Knockgrafton. Jack Madden, for that was the humpy man's name, had not been sitting long when he heard the tune going on within the moat, much sweeter than before, for the fairies were singing it the way Lusmore had settled their music for them. The song was going on, Deardaoin de Mairt, Deardaoin de Mairt, Deardaoin de Mairt, Deardaoin de Mairt, agus to Deardaoin, without ever stopping. Jack Madden, who was in a great hurry to get quit of his hump, never thought of waiting till the fairies were done, or waiting for a fit opportunity to raise the tune higher than Lusmore had. So, having heard them sing it 7 times over without stopping, out he bawls, never mind the time or the humour of the tune, or how he could even bring the words in properly. Agus to hAoine, thinking if one day was good, to Deardaoin, then 2, to Deardaoin agus to hAoine, were better, and that if Lusmore had 1 suit of clothes, maybe he should have 2. No sooner had the words passed his lips, he was taken up and whisked into the moat with prodigious force. The fairies came crowding round him with great anger, screeching and screaming, roaring out, "Who spoiled our tune? Who spoiled our tune?" One stepped up to him, above all the rest, and said, Jack Madden, your words came so badden, the tune we felt gladden, this castle you're hadden, that your life we may sadden, here's 2 humps for Jack Madden." And 20 of the strongest fairies brought Lusmore's hump, and put it down upon poor Jack's back, over his own hump, where it became fixed as firmly as it was nailed on with a 12-penny nail, by the best carpenter that ever drove one. Out of their castle they kicked him, and in the morning, when Jack Madden's mother and her gossip came to look after the little man, they found him half dead, lying at the foot of the moat, with the other hump upon his back. Well, to be sure how they did look at each other, but they were afraid to say anything lest a hump might be put on their shoulders too. Home they brought the unlucky Jack Madden with them, as downcast in their hearts and their looks as 2 gossips ever were. And what through the weight of his other hump and long journey, he died soon after, leaving, they say, his heavy curse to anyone who would go to listen to the fairy tunes at Knockgrafton again.